All right, y'all. We are ready to get started. Today, I'm going to be off camera. My kids have been sick all week, and I thought I was going to get away scot free, y'all. Thought I wasn't going to catch it. But them little germs crept up on me, okay? And I'm sniffing and sniggling. But I was like, let me go ahead and get on here because I know this weekend I missed Freedom Friday and Storytime Saturday. I said, so let me get on here so people don't think I'm just going MIA. But I also have started reading another book. So I'm excited to get into that one. After I finish this one, the book I'm reading right now. So I'm reading a bunch of books. Honestly, I know, Lady J, you said you an avid reader too. So I'm always like reading multiple books at the same time. Yes, you can have an apple, baby. And y'all know, if you don't know, I'm a single mom. I have a 5-year old, a 4-year old, and a 2-year old. Um, but this whole book talk, um, I guess program or event came from last month and the month before last. I did a book talk based off of my first book that I self-published in 2018, and it was an amazing experience just to be able to come together and discuss my book. Yes, it was my book, but it's the concepts of the book. Let me be able to hear how impactful the conversation was, because a lot of times we read books, and like me personally, I'll say I used to just read books just to check it off. Like, in school, you had your summer reading list. You had to read a certain number of books. And that was kind of my mindset growing up, like to just be able to check it off to say, oh, I read this amount of books this year. But this, at the end of last year, and well, I'll say for the past few years, I've been trying to be more intentional about reading books and actually applying the knowledge that I'm getting from them, and then not just be about, oh, I read this book and that's that. And then when somebody asks you, oh, what was it about? You don't have an answer. So, and I'm a fast reader. I can be a fast reader. So I want to make sure that, especially with this book that I'm reading, Psycho-Cybernetics, I wanted to make sure that I was getting the wisdom and the knowledge that I'm meant to get from it and also applying it. So I ended up getting the workbook as well. It's not by the author, but it's been a good support with helping me to really get the concepts that I am reading from the book. Um, and feel free, whether you're on YouTube or here in the Zoom, drop what you're reading currently or what you've read recently that has made an impact on you. But really, how this goes. Last week I did more of a Spark Joy. Who's that by? Um, More of a formal conversation where I like put bullet points for the chapter. But it's a very intuitively guided experience. Really, anything I do is intuitively guided. So I'll check in beforehand to see if I'm supposed to do like an outline with points or whatever, or if I'm just supposed to read from the book like I did the first week for this book, for this version of the book talks. The actual book talk that we did for my book, um, we really I had a whole PowerPoint slide deck, and we had discussion questions. So I might bring up some discussion questions sometimes, and I think I did have some discussion questions last week. But I just feel led this week to kind of share some of the key points from the chapter that I read. And if any conversation or any questions come up around it, then feel free to either come off mute or drop it in the chat or in the comment section if you're on YouTube. But it's a really, um, I'll say, intuitively guided and free flowing space. And it's also opportunity for you as attendees to come in and share what you're reading, what you're getting from what you're reading, how you're applying and implementing the wisdom and knowledge that you're reading, and just really sharing a good book. Because you never know, it's so many books out there. You never know. Like a lot of people that I've mentioned Psycho-Cybernetics to, like, oh, I never heard about this book, but it's been around for probably since I think they said the 1800s was when the first edition of this book came about. Um, so it's been around for a while, and it's been really beneficial specifically for one of the things that I talk about. Um, I would say it's part psychology, part science, part personal development. It's mainly like they consider it in the genre is personal development, but it does touch on some psychology, it touches on some science, and personal development. So the front of the book, it says Psycho-Cybernetics, tap into the power of your subconscious mind to improve your self-image, learn to use your positive past, set and achieve worthwhile goals, develop compassion, self-respect, and forgiveness, cultivate the power of rational thinking, and discover the keys to a happier, more successful life. And my health coach, she actually recommended this book, and she says she reads it. She's read it multiple times. Um, and when she recommended it, I ended up finding it on YouTube. So if you don't necessarily want to buy a book, you can either go to YouTube and find it, especially if it's an older book, you can find the audio version. And if you have a library card, there's an app called Libby where you can use your library card to check out the audio or the ebook version of a lot of different books that are in your state or your country's library. So two really good resources when it comes to books, but that is where I started reading Psycho-Cybernetics. But there are like I said, it's scientific, but it's also psychology within the book too. So I ended up purchasing the print book so that I could like take notes and underline stuff and all of that. So if you got to know yourself and know the types of books that you can digest um as audiobooks or ebooks, or if you really need a print book. I sometimes have phases where I'll go through like, oh, just audiobooks. And then sometimes it'll just be print books. But right now I'm doing both. Because I'm reading this one, Psycho-Cybernetic. Well, I'm doing two ways. I'm reading right now Psycho-Cybernetics as the print book, and then the other one, It's Not You by, and that one is an audiobook. And I just started reading it yesterday. It's called It's Not You, Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People. And it's by Dr. Romani. I cannot pronounce her last name. It's spelled Durvasula. And so far, I've just listened to the introduction, and it's been really good so far. So, another book that I'm reading right now. But let's get into Psycho-Cybernetics. If you weren't here for the past two, I went over the first chapter of the book, and the title of the first chapter is The Self-Image, Your Key to a Better Life. And it really dove into really what your self-image is, how your self-image is created, and how in some cases it can be destroyed. The second chapter's title was, I'm flipping through the book, y'all. Discovering the success mechanism within you. And it really basically broke down how our habits are formed and how we can really shift our lives and shift the direction of our lives by tapping into our success mechanism instead of our failure mechanism. And chapter 3, which I just read again this week, is imagination. And it's the first key to your success mechanism. And this really stood out to me because I grew up with a mom who would always say, "Oh, I don't have an imagination. I don't you know, she would say like stuff like that part of my brain is dead, or I don't use my imagination. I just think, what I can see and think logically." But this chapter really showed and really talked. Okay, please stop. It talked about how we all use our imagination. Like people might say, "Oh, I don't have an imagination. I don't use my imagination," but it talked about how really every single day we're using our imagination. When you're having a conversation, or even if you're thinking certain thoughts about yourself, a lot of the things that we think, especially when they're negative, are imagined things. And it talked about this guy, told a story about this guy who considered himself ugly and funny looking. And it was because he imagined that people that he interacted with were laughing at him and talking about him behind his back because he felt like he looked odd. But if you talk to the people around him, and even people, strangers, they were like, he looks normal. Like there's nothing wrong with him. But it was because in his imagination, when he looked in the mirror, there was something that programmed his self image to believe that he was funny looking or odd. And he never really questioned it. He just went along with it. And what this book talks a lot about is your underlying or your limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in your situation or keep you stuck in where you are. And a guy actually was going to go undergo surgery to quote unquote correct the things that he felt was wrong with him. And it said, I'm reading certain aspects, certain things that I've what's the word, underlined in the book. And it says his imagination alone was responsible for his misery. How many times do you look at somebody and you like, what? Like, why is your life like that? Or even if you've had situations in your own personal life, it's like, what is going on? How did I get here? Or why am I feeling like this? Or why is this going on? And a lot of it has to do with our imagination, causing us to think or feel a certain way about a situation that is not really true, or believe something based off of a past experience. It says Dr. Maltz shows how we have goals and are using our imagination whether we think we are or not. We either use our imagination constructively or destructively. The key is becoming aware of which way you're using yours and improve on it daily. This is definitely not something, even thinking about school. And I was actually having this conversation with my mom not too long ago, how in some cases, like maybe early elementary school, you're taught to, use your imagination. But as you get into, the upper levels of school, you don't have the opportunities, you're not given opportunities in school to really use your imagination, maybe art or whatever the case may be, but it's not a huge part of our conditioning or how we're taught to do things as far as using our imagination. But if we're not intentionally using it, it's not going to automatically go to the constructive. It's going to go to the destructive, especially if you live in a certain environment or live in a certain part of the world. It's so much focus on the destructive things and the destructive patterns. We have to be very intentional about, okay, let me check in daily and see how I'm using my imagination. What is it that I'm creating in my world around me based off of my imagination? And it says creative imagination is not something reserved for the poets, the philosophers, the inventors. It enters into our every act. For imagination sets the goal, quote unquote, picture that our automatic mechanism works on. We act or fail to act, not because of will, as is so commonly believed, but because of imagination. A human being always acts and feels and performs in accordance with what he imagines to be true about himself and his environment. And this is one of the ones that I not only underline, but I start because when I read that, I like had to pause and take a deep breath. So I thought about some of the things, some of the ways that I've acted and some of the ways that I felt and just behaved and what I imagined to be true that contributed to that about myself and about my environment. And one of the biggest things was that I'm not safe. Because of my experiences as a child growing up, I always had this feeling or belief that I was not safe. So, seeking out relationships or behaving in certain ways, looking for safety, looking for security, it led me to, a lot of different things that I probably wouldn't have had I felt or believed that I was safe. Um, but it just made, like I said, it just made me really think about, and even thinking about some of the people in my life, like the way that they behave or the way that they show up, the way that they feel or perform out in this world is really because of how they see themselves in their environment. And it's really how they see themselves. If someone, whether it's a child or an adult, they feel like they're below average or a failure, that is how they're going to show up in life. But a lot of it is subconscious. I was listening to a video on YouTube about the attachment styles, and she was saying how 95% of our behavior comes from our subconscious. Only 3 to 5% of our behavior and how we show up comes from our conscious mind or our thinking mind, being more logically aware of what we're doing. But our subconscious is programmed for survival. So a lot of our behaviors are from us trying to majority of our behaviors are coming from our subconscious mind that is wired for survival. So if you think about some of the behaviors, some of the people around you, they're really just trying to survive. And if we don't do this work, if we don't, you know, even try to become more aware of our habits, of our behaviors, and really ask questions and really do the introspective work, it's like what they're gonna talk about further on, like living hypnotized and not even knowing it. And it goes on to talk about your nervous system cannot tell the difference between an imagined experience and a real experience. In either case, it reacts automatically to information that you give it from your forebrain. Your nervous system reacts appropriately to what you think or imagine to be true. So whether you imagine yourself to not be safe in an environment or in a space or even within yourself, or if it's actually true, your nervous system cannot tell the difference. So if you're like for me, I was constantly in a space of my sympathetic nervous system, constantly in that fight, flight, or freeze, constantly trying to make sure that I'm surviving, making sure that I'm safe. So that is how I was showing up in the world, in the space of being hyper vigilant, always looking for scanning my environment, always looking for the threat, always looking for the unsafe person, when the more I looked for it, the more I found it. I've heard this like example of, when you go to buy a vehicle and you have this certain vehicle in mind, and whether you buy the vehicle or not, you start to see that same vehicle all around you, because subconsciously that's what you want, that's what you desire. So when you're constantly having experiences of not feeling safe or not being safe, it's because subconsciously your mind is constantly scanning for unsafe things. So when we can program our servo mechanism for safety, that's what our experiences become. When we start to imagine a more safe environment, imagine being safe in our being and in our bodies, we start to become more safe and have safer experiences. So it goes on to talk about, before I move on, did anybody have any questions, anything that they wanted to add to this conversation? Feel free. And you can give me any feedback if I'm going too fast or anything like that. Let me know.
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How does that apply to how does that apply to being an African American woman, like living in different cities and environments? So for example, I'm in DC.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that you have to scan, if I'm walking by myself and I'm getting off work late at night and there's no one else there but me and I gotta make it home up MLK Avenue and it's
Mm-hmm.
11:30, 12 o'clock at night. I have to scan the environment around me. I have to be hyper vigilant about, okay, I have to go down this street, go around this corner, go through this intersection, whether I'm walking or I'm driving. So I'm wondering how to apply. It's like how does one apply the information that you just shared to that? Because if you know certain parts of different cities, it doesn't matter like whether you're in Baltimore, DC, New Orleans, you're going to scan the area if you're in a survival state.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nothing. I, I'll just say it doesn't seem like there's any other way to think but to be hyper vigilant about your personal safety.
Yeah, it's definitely like I understand. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and my best friend is from Southeast. So I ran around in high school out in Southeast. So I know DC, and I'm in Maryland. So like like the book talks about, the difference. You consciously now, because of the environment that you live in, that there's a potential threat around any corner. You know what I'm saying? So it's logical to have this, to be in your sympathetic nervous system, to be prepared to fight, flight, or freeze in any situation as you're walking home at a certain time of night. But when you get home, you don't want to have to stay in that space of hypervigilance. You don't want to stay in that space of your sympathetic nervous system. You want to have spaces, places, and opportunities, people, and environments in your life where you don't have to always be hypervigilant, where you don't always have to be in your sympathetic nervous system. Because the more we're constantly in that space, the more cortisol our body is pumping through our body, and the more damage it's doing to our organs and the other parts of who we are, because we're constantly experiencing this stress hormone. We're constantly experiencing this, having these experiences where we have to always be on guard. We always have to be hyper vigilant. But the difference between a perceived threatening situation and a non-threatening situation, but sometimes because we have to have these reoccurring experiences, sometimes it's harder for us to come out of that sympathetic nervous system, to come out of the fight, flight, or freeze response. So it's important for us to have practices, like I have used this quote so many times: prepare for war in times of peace. So when you're at home or you're in those environments or with those people that feel safe, that you can let your guard down, do it. Be intentional about doing it. Be intentional about when you have your alone time or when you're home, if you're in a safe home where you can do the meditation, do the deep breathing, do the imagination work to imagine what you want your life to be like outside of those times where you have to be intentionally hyper vigilant. So does that answer your question?
Kinda, but for a sister that doesn't know what that's like,
Mm-hmm.
that that's the lens I'm looking through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, if you don't know what it's like to go to sleep and not have gunshots, not hear gunshots, it's like a numbness.
Yeah.
that you only know how to be in your whatever. You can add any city to
Mhm.
what I'm saying. I only know, for example, how to be in my Detroit state of mind. I only know how to be in my, Chicago state of mind, my DC state of mind, my Baltimore state of mind. I know that when I go out my door, I have to think in a certain way. And then sometimes for some people, when they're coming in their home and or their building, it doesn't end. It meets you right at the door before you get to your door. And
Mhm.
it's like, oh wow, okay. So I'm just I was just throwing a question out there for somebody who may not know, who only knows how to operate in that state of mind, that they may not understand that there's actually, you know what I'm saying? You can actually think your way into feeling. You can you can change what you're feeling in your environment. And sometimes when you're in it and you're numb from it and you don't get any peace,
Mhm.
you don't it's like, wow, what does she mean? How do I do that? So for example, I can give you some other examples of, you were saying to find that space in people that you feel you could, you feel safe with. Well, if there are multiple gunshots going outside of your, where you live at, it could be outside of your home, your apartment, across the street, wherever it's going on. Then you may also, live in a home or in a building that has thin walls, and then you have loud music, and then you may have on top of that people arguing, and there's no peace in that. So I'm just wondering, how could a sister even apply that in that situation where she's got to get her nervous system out of, survival, fight or flight. I made it from the metro or the bus to my front door without anything happening. I made it from, maybe the front door of the apartment building to my actual apartment door, and nothing happened. And now I'm locked into my home or my apartment. But I still feel like it's like everything that's outside that you one feels, it's still with them. So how do they even get their nervous system to get out of that mode with all of that going on?
Mhm. Yeah, and you kind of touched on it. Like you have these moments where it's like, okay, I know that when I'm walking down the street, I can't let my guard down. I gotta make sure that I'm not on my phone. I gotta make sure that my earphones are off. I gotta make sure that I'm paying attention to my surroundings, my environment, what's going on. So at any moment, if I gotta run or if I gotta duck, if I gotta do X, Y, Z, like I know, like I can see it. I'm not unaware of what's going on. But once you make it to your apartment building, you like, ooh, I can take a deep breath because I'm safe. I made it home safely. You know what I'm saying? I made it to my building safely. Once you get to your door, put that key in there, you take that pause, you take that deep breath, like, all right, I'm good. Like I made it home. It's about those micro moments of, okay, I'm safe. And even in those situations where you're hearing things around you, you can pause within yourself because it starts with you. That's really where that work begins is internally. The more safe you feel within yourself, the less the things going on around you will impact your nervous system. So that's where it starts. Because the environment can still be chaotic, but you can literally be peaceful internally and that not impact your nervous system. It not make you go into that hyper stress mode when you're doing that work to say, okay, I'm safe within myself, even though my environment is not always safe, even though I have to be in my sympathetic nervous system. Once I get home, I know I can take a deep breath, lock my door, and know that internally I'm safe. So, doing that inner work of the self image, doing that inner work of meditation, of deep breathing, of practicing these things that will help you feel safe internally, the external environment won't impact you as much or for as long. So it'll be like, all right, I'm walking home. I know I got to be in my sympathetic because I know I got to be prepared to run, duck, fight at any given moment. But once I get home, and I'm doing this inner work, it might take me, before I even started, it might take me a good 2 hours to calm down, come out of that sympathetic nervous system. But the more you do that work, all right, now I'm doing this work to feel internally safe, to feel internally secure. It might only take me an hour and 30 minutes to calm down and get back into my calm state before I get home. Or when I get home. And as time goes on, it's gonna be an hour. Time goes on, it's gonna be 30 minutes. Time goes on, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then it's like soon as you hit your door, that door closed and locked, you're like, oh, I'm good. So it's doing that inner work and knowing that it's going to take time, especially when it's like you've lived your life in survival mode. You lived your life inside of your fight, flight, or freeze response. You've lived your life inside of trauma and chaos and dysfunction. And for me, coming out of one, living in the city, also recently coming out of a abusive marriage, it was like I literally was always in survival mode. I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was always waiting for the next issue to come up or for the next fight to pop off. But the more that I did that inner work to see myself as safe, to see my environment as safe, and to release the limiting beliefs around me not being safe and secure within myself, the more my environment didn't bother me. The more what other people were doing, saying, or thinking didn't bother me. So it really starts with you doing that inner work and knowing that it's going to take time over time to really be able to shift your body and your being into your parasympathetic nervous system where you can breathe and feel safe and calm within yourself. Let that answer and give you more of an answer to your question.
Yeah, I just had I was just going to ask for anyone that still hasn't experienced that. So let's say, remember I was just sharing the I call it the numbness. And that's
Mm-hmm.
probably not even a real word, but it's exactly, I'm thinking of a time that I lived in a pretty dangerous environment. And it was the only word I could think of when I went to a workshop and I couldn't participate in it. But the only word that came to my mind was numb. And
Yeah.
that's all I could say to the lady was, I'm sorry, but I just don't feel what, you know, my body. I was completely honest with her. I was just like, I'm not feeling this, which is, a phrase in that particular city that's used, but I had to articulate that I was feeling numb. I was like, yeah, I feel numb. I don't feel like I don't whatever you're talking about, I don't get it. And so she was like, well, could you explain? And I was like, yeah, I feel numb. And she said, well, you understand how you feel. And
Mm-hmm.
so I left and I let it sit with me. And on my way back home, I passed a couple of people in the neighborhood and they checked in asking how I was doing and I was just like, I don't know how you feel. And they was like numb. And so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even say it to them. So when I got home, unlocked my door, locked myself back in there, and I sat down at the kitchen table, I was just like, okay, so these people only see me in passing. They
Mm-hmm.
feel the same way in the same environment. So I'm just wondering for someone who doesn't know anything but what it feels like to feel numb, what are they physically feeling in their body when they apply what you're sharing? So that they can recognize that the feeling of being numb is gone. Because I can say, I don't get it, like I said to the lady, but I was really feeling numb and didn't realize that until after I had to take myself out of that environment to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I return to it is when I realize, okay, wow, that's that. There goes that that feeling again. What is that? That's numb. So I mean, and what I guess I'm just throwing it out there that everybody feels things differently.
Mm-hmm.
But how does, like, in the book and the information that you're given, if there is a sister listening, whether she's a sister or just an individual woman, how will she know that that feeling is gone? How will
And
she know applying it?
yeah, like you said, everybody is going to feel things differently, and it's going to take practice. Because, like for me, I didn't necessarily know after my marriage that I was out of that numb space and place until I started to feel joy with the things that brought me joy before, that no longer brought me joy when I was in that numb state of mind or that numb place. So it's going to be a different experience for everybody. It's a matter of one, having taken time for reflection, taking that time to check in with yourself to see, like, do I feel any different? I'm doing the work. I'm reading, I'm meditating, I'm taking a deep breath, I'm XYZ. Do I feel any different? Checking in, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever the case may be, taking that time to check in to even see, okay, am I feeling any different? So, for example, and this is a physical example, my mom, she is pretty much like sedentary a lot. She works from home and she sits at her desk all the time. So I started having her do like chair yoga, chair workouts, or whatever the case may be with me, just to get her some type of movement. And I checked in with her and maybe like 2 to 3 weeks in. I'm like, hey Ma, are you feeling any different? She like, nah, not really. So maybe a few days after that, she like, girl, I reached to what she say? I reached to scratch my back and I can actually reach my back to scratch. She like, I wasn't paying attention to the differences, but I'm seeing that there are differences. So sometimes it's going to take you being in that situation again to realize, oh, there is a difference. It's going to take, like for me, for example, another example, and this is like a mental emotional example, where financially I've been going through it after my divorce. I've been going through it, just trying to figure things out, taking care of 3 kids on my own. And I was stressed about my finances on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But I had this experience where I woke up and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. But my bank was sending me text messages about some transactions that I didn't make. And in that moment, usually what would have happened was I would have had a literal meltdown, freak out, trip out because of the situation that was going on. Cause I'm like, I don't even got enough to take care of my bills. So somebody else taking money out of my bank account and I'm not gonna be able to cover my bills. But in that moment, what I experienced was this peace and calm. Like, you know what, it's gonna be taken care of. I responded to the bank text messages and let them know those weren't my transactions. Everything from there went smoothly. And to the point where I even prayed for the individual that in no way, shape, or form I probably never meet them. But I prayed for the individual to be healed so that and to be able to receive the things that they need so that they won't feel like they have to steal from other people in order to get what they want, need, require, desire, whatever it is. But for me, that was when I realized, oh, I've healed so much in my relationship with money. So sometimes you won't even know that there's a difference, or you won't even feel a difference until you have a similar experience again. And you're like, oh, I'm actually okay. I'm actually calm. I'm actually peaceful. I'm actually good. And that's why I said to prepare for peace, prepare for war in times of peace. So you're doing this work. It's really about planting seeds. And if you know Seeds, they don't produce fruit overnight. It's going to take some time for you to produce that fruit. So it may take, if you've been in this space for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of constantly being in survival mode, it might take, hopefully it won't take the same amount of time, but it's going to take some time for you to see the fruit of the seeds that you're planting. But just know that eventually a situation is going to come up and you're not going to react from that fight, or freeze response. And then you will know, like, oh, the work is actually working. I'm actually making some progress. But we often want this, okay, I'm doing this work like like me, how I used to be with working out. Like, look, I'm working out 2 hours a day for a week. I'm expecting to be down 10 to 15 pounds at the end of the week, okay? Because I'm putting in the work. But it's compounding time and consistency, putting in, doing these things over time, so that eventually you can look in the mirror and be like, oh, these reps I'm putting in are actually working. It's actually making a difference. But if we say, okay, or even if you get to the point where you like, oh, I've been doing this work and I'm feeling good, I'm not going to do it no more. You got to maintain the work. You got to sustain and maintain the work so that your cup is continuously filled to overflow. So that when you have these experiences of times where, the chaos is happening, the trauma is happening, the issues are happening, you're like, oh, I didn't fill my cup up to the point where, I'm good. This is not going to get to me because I've planted these seeds. I'm starting to bear this fruit. And these situations and circumstances no longer make me react or respond the way that I used to. So I see your comments in the chat. I was on it. I was hitting it. Yeah. So I definitely, understand that situation where it's like you don't know anything else but to feel numb because you built up this, you're working constantly to protect yourself, to keep yourself from being hurt, to keep yourself from being, used, abused, whatever the case may be. So you built up this wall, so you're numb. Like, you don't want to feel anything. I don't want to feel anything. I don't want to, have a reaction or response. So I'm just going to go completely numb and just survive this next day so that I can lay down and wake up the next day and not feel anything. So I definitely get it. But like I said, it's work. It takes time. And then just being tuned in and tapped into yourself to check in and say, okay, how I got this is how I usually react or respond to these things. Am I reacting or responding any different over time? Because sometimes the things that you do, whether it's meditation or deep breathing or imagination and visualization work, there are different seasons for different things. So for me, every day I'm checking in. I have a daily nourishing list. I'm checking in with myself. I do something called kinesthetic muscle test, and I'm checking in with myself to see what's in line for the day. Because every single day I might face something different and I might need this tool or I might need to be filled up in this way so that I can handle what's going on. So it's for me, I'm more proactive than reactive. So I'm filling myself up, filling my cup up before the day even starts. So if the chaos come, the drama come, the traumas come, I've done the work prior to so that I can handle these situations and circumstances that come up from a place of peace and calm, from a place of my parasympathetic nervous system. So, any more questions or anything else you wanted to touch on with that? Okay. Yes, Lady J, thank you so much for those questions, girl. Because this is really helping me. Like, it's really helping me to see what I'm reading in a different way and be able to apply it on a deeper level. So I appreciate you for being here. What time is it? Oh, we just got into it. These things is only supposed to be 30 minutes long. um, all right, let me see. Let me check on YouTube to see if anybody had any questions. Okay, I don't see anything over here. But if anybody is watching a recording, they have a question, anything like that, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the comment section. But one more page that I wanted to read, and it was talking about um what I mentioned as far as being in a hypnotized state of mind, um, and not even realizing it. Um, but it also talks about doing like mental practices. There were examples of people that, and they did a study where they had three test groups, and the first group, and it was basketball players. The first group actually did 20 minutes of free throw shooting. The second group of people didn't do any type of extra practice at all. The first group did 20 minutes a day of free throw shooting. The second group did no practice, and then the third group just practiced doing their free throws in their mind. And there was only a 1% difference of improvement between the group that did the actual practicing of doing the free throw shots and the group that just imagined themselves doing the free throw shots. So that is how powerful our imagination can be when it comes to improving our situation, improving our skills, improving our habits and our mindset. Um, but I'm trying to find the part about the hypnosis. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. But it's really going into the same thing that I was talking about earlier, where it's like the way that you. Oh, that might be the next chapter. It is, y'all. I'm getting ahead of myself. Because chapter 4 is dehypnotize yourself from false beliefs. So I'm trying to jump ahead. We're gonna talk about the dehypnotizing yourself next week. But I want you to remember, um, the biggest thing is that we are so much more powerful and capable than we give ourselves credit for. This section of the book, it says know the truth about yourself, and I underlined this part. It said the scripture tells us that God created man a little lower than the angels and gave him dominion, that God created man in his own image. If we really believe in the all wise, all powerful, all loving creator, then we are in a position to draw some logical conclusion about that which he has created, man. In the first place, such an all wise and all powerful creator would not turn out inferior products any more than a master painter would paint inferior canvases. Such a creator would not deliberately engineer his product to fail any more than a manufacturer would deliberately build failure into an automobile. So, whether you believe in God, source, universe, higher power, inner being, you got to really think about that. My God, source, universe would not create an inferior product. So, when you think about yourself, think more highly of yourself and your capability and what you're capable of doing and achieving and being. Don't sell yourself short. Don't sell your ability short. Don't allow society's ideas of who you are or even what people have told you you should be to cause you to downplay yourself and your abilities. I show up and I shine and I share the gifts, the wisdom, the knowledge, and understanding that I have because my desire and my mission, and if you've been to any of my events, you've heard my mission. I'm here to guide you to see and be your most authentic self. The more each of us can see and be our most authentic selves, the better the world will be. Because nobody is trying to be like somebody else or do something like somebody else. They're literally being who God, source, universe created them to be. And that is what the world was missing when they were born. So we're filling the void that the world was missing by being our most authentic selves. As God sees us as men and women in whom and through whom he can do a great work. That old sense of unworthiness and failure must go. It is false, and we are not to believe what is false. So that is all I will share for today. Lady J, if it's anything as far as like this book or anything else from a book that you're reading that you wanted to share, feel free to do that at this time.
I'll share next time.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me, girl. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I really, really do. Um, Tomorrow, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow is How to Self Publish with Ease. It was supposed to be February 7th, but my VA scheduled it accidentally for tomorrow, and I already got, I think, 9 people signed up. So I'm going to go ahead and run it tomorrow, run the How to Self Publish with Ease masterclass tomorrow. Hopefully, I'm feeling a little better so I can be on camera, but I appreciate you, sis. Thank you so much for coming. And just remember, if nobody told you today, I love you, I see you, and I'm so proud of you just for being you. You are enough, you are worthy, you are valuable just as you are. You were born that way. No situation, circumstance, or experience should be able to take away from that because you were born with an infinite level of value, worth, and enoughness. So I have to remind myself that. So I like to remind y'all of that as well. So thank you for joining me tonight. And thank you to those that will catch the replay. Feel free to drop any questions or any feedback about these book talks so that we can continue to improve them. But again, y'all, good night. And I will see y'all in the next one.
All right, bye.
Good night.
Thanks.
You're welcome. See you soon.